Hey folks, welcome back to the Edupedia world. And I am Abhinay Gupta. And today again we'll continue with the chapter the Audit and Auditor. Right? So we have done with the basic provisions and we have reached the most awaited section, that is section 141. Right? That we have been taking references in the previous section like section 139. Right? We have seen the various provisions of 139 and section 140 as well. Right? Now, when we look into section 141, right, we are basically talking about the eligibility criteria. We're talking about the qualification and disqualification of the auditor, right? So before getting ahead with anything else, we would first get into the eligibility for appointment as an auditor, right? After understanding the eligibility for appointment, we would go ahead with the disqualification of the auditor, right? So when we talk about eligibility, that includes the qualification, which is a very short thing, right? Because if you want to be an auditor of the company, right, then the only eligibility that you require is to become a chartered accountant, right? Now, if we look at it in detail, then section 141 of this act, of the Companies Act 2013, what does it actually seek to ensure? That the auditor who has been taken in or who has been appointed in the company to perform the audit work of the company should be professionally qualified, should be an independent individual or an independent firm, and they should not have any financial interest in the company for which they are going ahead to do the audit. Because if they have any financial interest in that company, right, their auditing would be biased, right? So they are supposed to maintain their own integrity and give an unbiased and an objective judgment with reference to whatever financial instrument they are analyzing, right? That means they are supposed to give the true and fair judgment on the financial statement of any company, right? So they have to be qualified, independent, as well as without any financial interest in the same company, right? Now, if you look at the eligibility, so if I consider the eligibility of an individual, then the only eligibility for appointment is that he needs to be a chartered accountant. And when we talk about a person being a chartered accountant, right, that means a person who has qualified the CA examinations and has also completed the GMCS training and received the membership certificate, right? If I talk about the eligibility of a firm, right, then the firm would be eligible for appointment only if the majority of its partners who are practicing in India are chartered accountants, right? So all these two terms are very important. First, that majority of the partner, more than half of the partner should be chartered accountant. But more than half of what? More than half of those who are practicing in India. Because anybody who's abroad from the same firm, we don't care, right? And that could also be LLP, because when we are talking about majority being a chartered accountant means there are others also, right? So it's a limited liability partnership that they have taken in. So if I take the example of KPMG or BSR affiliates or BSR associates. So KPMG globally may have a lot of partners, but we don't care about them. What we see is the majority partners who are in India should be chartered accountants. And that is how BSR, the KPMG operates in India by the name of BSR. That is how BSR gets the audit. Right? That is how BSR as an LLP is qualified to take in the audit, right? And where the firm is an LLP that we have considered for the auditing purpose, then only the partners who are chartered accountants shall be authorized to act as a chartered accountant, to act as an auditor, and only they should be authorized to sign on behalf of the firm. So if in my limited liability partnership, I also have a lawyer, that doesn't mean I can send the lawyer to audit the firm, right? The auditing part has to be taken care by the auditor. That means the chartered accountant himself. Okay with the same? So this is about the eligibility and that is about the qualification. Now the main thing to understand in this section, section 141, would be the disqualification, right? So disqualification has to be sought very wisely. So we have a lot of disqualifications that we need to check. So let us go one by one. So first, body corporate other than LLP. Yes. So these are the people who are not eligible for appointment because we're talking about disqualification. So it says any body corporate is disqualified to be an auditor. You cannot have a company as an auditor. You can only have an individual or a firm. But when we talk about body corporate, understand even the limited liability partnership is considered to be a body corporate, right? Because there are mix and match of various professions over there. So limited liability partnership is the only body corporate that is allowed to be an auditor. Other than that, if you are any other body corporate, you cannot be an auditor of any company. So you're disqualified at all, right? The first thing to check is somebody who is approaching or somebody is applying to be an auditor, is it a firm or an individual or a limited liability partnership? Only then will they be qualified to be an auditor. If it's a body corporate, disqualified, right? Next, if there is any officer or any employee of the same company whose audit needs to be conducted, they will be disqualified, right? So understand, the company cannot come up on one fine day and say that, okay, in my finance department, the finance head, Mr. X, right? He is also a chartered accountant, qualified from the same institute. So I would request him to conduct my audit. Do you think that is possible? The answer is no, because that person being a part of the firm is responsible for preparing the financial statements. So somebody who is preparing the financial statement cannot go ahead to audit the same. Plus, somebody who is a part of the company, right, and who is responsible will never bring out his own faults, will never let the company go down because he will be biased. His salary, his increments, his whatever incentives that the person will be getting on that behalf. So irrespective of that thought, any officer or employee of the same company cannot be an auditor for that company, right? Third, any partner of the officer or employee. So now understand, in this situation, the officer or employee of the company has also opened up a firm. And in that firm, that employee has a partner. And the employee says, okay, let's do one thing. Let's appoint my partner as an auditor instead of me, because I am disqualified, right? I, being an employee of your company, I cannot get ahead with the audit. But same or similar is not the case with my partner. So take in my partner, he is an external person, but understand, that partner's judgment and that partner's analysis will again be biased because his other partner is an employee, right? So the person who is a partner of an officer or employee of the company, or who is in employment of the officer or employee of the company, cannot audit. So in the other firm, neither my partner can do the audit nor any of my employee or subordinate can do the audit. So anybody from my firm, if I am an employee of the company, anybody from my firm cannot do the audit, neither me nor anybody from my firm, right? You understand? So what all things we have linked to disqualify so that there is no biasness, and what we are actually looking forward for an unbiased and objective judgment, right? So we'll have to cater to these requirements as well. Next, beyond that, now if there's a person, right, or that person's relative or that person's partner, I'm not talking about employees, right? I'm talking about any person. If any of the person or the relative or the partner is holding any security in this company, right, is holding any security in this company, they'll be disqualified. Now, when I say holding security in this company, does not only include this company. You see on the screen, we have written cash, C-A-S-H. So this is a easy terminology to remember all the components. So when I say about cash, C stands for the company, A stands for any associate company, S stands for any subsidiary company, and H stands for holding company, right? And when we're talking about both subsidiary and holding, also remember it's about a subsidiary of such holding also. So I am a subsidiary, I have a holding, and that holding has some other subsidiary, right? So if anybody who is having shares or security, who holds security in any of these companies, right, will be disqualified. Why? Because again, the concern of biasness will peep in, that this person is biased, right? So we do not require that biasness to peep in, and hence we would not entertain that. And it is not only to that person, also his relative or his partner, because they are very influential, right? So any person, their relative or their partner, if they are holding any security in the company, associate company, subsidiary company, holding company, subsidiary of the holding company, any of these sector, which I will represent as cash moving forward, he'll be disqualified, right? Further, if the person or the relative or the partner is indebted in excess of rupees 5 lakh, right, into the same cash, company, associate, subsidiary, holding, and the subsidiary of holding, then that person will also be disqualified. That means if you're holding security, you are interested because if you give a good report, the securities will rise. If you are indebted, again you'll be biased because if you find out any big fault and the company goes for a toss, you are in trouble, right? Because you'll have to pay it off, even the worst case of dissolution or liquidation as well, right? Or you're indebted, you will say, okay, listen, I'll help you out in these things. Please let my debt be off. Consider it doubtful and bad, right? Or whatever be the case, right? So that is why what we do is we do not allow these kinds of biasness to peep in, right? And when we talk about the 5 lakh limit indebtedness, right? So 5 lakh is something which is prescribed as of now, right? But if you know the law terminology, what you generally write is whatever the amount is prescribed. And then you can also mention that currently the prescribed amount is 5 lakhs. Because if you directly go for 5 lakhs, then in future that limit may change. Because law doesn't say 5 lakhs, law says prescribed. Currently what is prescribed is 5 lakhs. Are you getting the point? Do you understand the difference between the two statements that I have just used? Right? This is what you have already seen. Further, the person or his relative or the partner who has given a guarantee or provided any security in connection with the indebtedness of a third party. Again, for any limit prescribed, and here the limit would be 1 lakh. So understand in this situation what has happened. Or let us understand all the three situations. First, me, my relative or my partner should not hold any security in that company or the relative companies, the cash, right? Second, me or my relative or my partner should not be indebted to cash. Third, me or my relative or my partner should not have taken the guarantee of the person who is indebted to the cash. Neither am I directly indebted nor am I indirectly indebted. Directly indebtedness limit is 5 lakhs. Indirectly indebtedness limit is 1 lakh. Now are you clear with this? I don't want any confusion, right? Understand why am I explaining this from all angles is because during the examination you don't have to mug up and write the answers, right? There'll be case study, so you'll have to analyze. Obviously when you are quoting the requirement of the law, you will jot down these points as well, but understand you will jot down and you will explain only when you understand the case, right? So this is very important for you to understand, right? But again over here you have certain limits that the person will not be disqualified if the relative holds any security in the company whose face value is not exceeding 1000 rupees. I am going to be the auditor. Some of my relative is holding any share whose face value is less than 1000 and the cumulative sum total is less than 1 lakh. Then I have no issues, right? Again, there is a limit prescribed. Understand, 1 lakh is a very small amount to disqualify a person for. For 1 lakh rupee, because audit fees are going very high, we are talking about companies, right? So 1 lakh is something below the threshold. So the act says, okay, we'll excuse 1 lakh, right? If they are very small shares and cumulative is less than 1 lakh, let's excuse it because on those petty issues, we cannot disqualify a person. If we are getting a good auditor, then because of such petty issue, because some of the relative are doing this and doing that, let's avoid that, right? And after that also, if the relative acquires any security exceeding 1 lakh, then the auditor shall take the corrective action within next 60 days to maintain the limit of 1 lakh. Again, a relaxation is given. That okay, if by chance your relative has security beyond 1 lakh, dispose it off. In short, that is what he wants to say. Dispose it off or sell it off to somebody else, right? That too within 60 days. If you are able to do that, okay, you are an auditor. If you are not able to do that, you are disqualified, right? So this all was one single point. Next disqualification that will be attracted is a person who has business relationship with cash, right? When we talk about a person, we also include the firm. So an individual or a firm who has a business relationship in such nature which is prescribed with the cash. And this business relationship can be directly, can be indirectly. In both the case, you are disqualified. And again, cash is company, associate company, subsidiary company, holding company, and the subsidiary of the holding company, right? But in this case, we extend to a subsidiary of such associate company as well. So please make sure that in this point, right, where we are talking about business relationship, we are also considering the subsidiary of associate. Otherwise, we do not consider the subsidiary of associates. We have just 5 components, here we have 6 components. This is a key point to be noted, right? You may get a question where on the previous part about holding security, they hold security in the subsidiary of associate. Then it is valid, it is not disqualified. Because subsidiary of associate is not mentioned over there. Subsidiary of associates is mentioned in this case where they have a business relationship, right? You'll have to be very careful with these minute details as well, because we never know where the institute would be testing, right? So for this, we'll also need to understand now what is business relationship. Yeah, we say that okay, if they have business relationship, they're disqualified. But what is the definition of business relationship? So business relationship basically is explained by the rule 10, right? So it is a transaction which is entered into for commercial purpose. So the company and the individual, the person or the firm. Understand over here again, we are not talking about the relative, we're talking about the person or the firm, right? They should not be involved in any business relationship. And business relationship basically means any commercial transaction which may be in the nature of, say, professional service, right? Which is permissible to be entered, right? So business relationship, normally we understand commercial transactions, right? Transactions which are commercial in nature. But all these transactions which are although commercial, right, but are professional in nature and are permitted to be rendered by any auditor, those kinds of things will be left out of the ambit, right? That will not attract disqualification because already which transaction has been allowed to the auditor can do. The auditor need not be disqualified on the transaction which is of professional service and that is allowed, right? So that is an exception, right? And where are the auditors allowed? They're allowed under the Chartered Accountant Act and not under the Companies Act, right? Please make that sure. Plus, if we talk about the commercial transaction, which generally occur in the ordinary course of business at the arm's length price. So if I'm the company and I sell certain of my commodity to the general public at rupee 100, and the auditor is auditing with me, auditor says, yeah, even I want that. Yeah, I'm ready to pay rupees 100. I just want to buy it. I like the product. I want to use it. So do you think there is any biasness creeping in? Am I taking any favor? No, I would have in general bought it from outside even if I was not an auditor, right? So any such commercial transaction which are in the ordinary course of business of the company and are being transacted at the arm length price, right? Like the sale of a product or service to the auditor or any other thing, right? So that is allowed. For example, if the company is involved in telecommunication, hospitality, airline services, and then they give the same things to the, like if it's Airtel, right? And the auditor is also using Airtel. So whatever bill is given to the auditor is the normal bill that would have been given to anybody else. I'm auditing the hospital and God forbid, and the auditor needs to admit some of the family member to the same hospital at the same charges. That is general, right? That is in the ordinary course of business. So that will not attract disqualification. Next, a person whose relative is a director, right? Or that relative is in employment with the company as a director or the managerial person. So if my relative, maybe my brother-in-law, right, he is into a company and with his reference, I get into the auditing of the company. And he is not just an employee, he's a director or a key managerial person. So he has a control over the company as well. And now when I'm into an audit, he will also have a substantial interest and can affect my decision or my judgment on the financial statement. So that is why if my relative is in the key managerial position, right, I will not be allowed to be an auditor of that company, right? So and a person who is in a full-time employment elsewhere is also disqualified. If I am into a full-time employment with, for example, KPMG, right, then I cannot be an auditor individually for some other firm, for some other company. If I'm in a part-time employment or if I'm in a practice, yes, I can. But if I've already taken a full-time employment, right, I will not be able to do justice with my audit because full-time employment requires my time and even the audit would require my time. I cannot sit back at home and do the audit at night, right? Now, again, if we move away to see, then if there is any person, right, or any partner of any firm, like we are appointing a firm as an auditor, and any of the partner who is appointed as an auditor, if that partner is appointed or reappointed, holding appointment as an auditor in more than 20 companies, he'll be disqualified. That means there's a limit given to the number of audits that we can take. So if me as an individual, as an auditor, if I take up more than 20 audits, I'm disqualified, right? If my firm, if the auditors or the partners of my firm, they take up audit and they exceed 20 audits, then the entire firm is disqualified, right? And the limit for this 20, right, for an individual is straight away 20, but for the firm is 20 for each partners, right? 20 for each partners. So if the limit is exceeded, the person stands disqualified. But what companies do we consider for that limit is again the question, right? So while we are computing the limit of these 20 companies, right, then the following companies would be considered for that calculation. That is a public company, a private company, company having share capital, company having no share capital, companies limited by guarantee, government company, and not-profit organization or not-for-profit companies, right? So you have to understand whenever we are considering this limit. So if I am auditing 20 public companies, I cannot take any more. If I'm auditing 10 public and 10 private, I cannot take in any more. If I'm, for example, auditing 10 public, 2 private, 2 with share capital, 2 without share capital, and remaining 4 companies of who are limited by guarantee, again I'm disqualified. So all these category companies, if I'm taking over, then cumulatively 20 is my limit, or individually, right? If the auditor is convicted by the court of an offense which involves fraud, right, and I have been convicted for over 10 years of imprisonment. No, it's not about 10 years of imprisonment. If it is about ever if I have been convicted and 10 years has not been completed after that conviction, I will not be allowed to be a auditor. That means if today I am convicted, for the next 10 years, I will be disqualified. Getting the point? It is not necessary that I'll be imprisoned for 10 years, right? But it's a matter of fraud and I have been convicted. So once I'm convicted, I'm disqualified for the next 10 years. So unless and until that 10 years lapse from my conviction, right, I will not be allowed to be a director again, auditor again. But over the period of 10 years, if I haven't been convicted again, means I have improved, I'm not doing bad things now. So they say, okay, and I think the person has changed, let's take him as an auditor. He has no bad track record as of the past 10 years, right? And the last one is any person whose subsidiary or any associate company or any other form of entity is engaged in consulting and specialized service as provided in 144, right? So as on the date of appointment, if the person whose subsidiary, associate or any other firm is engaged in any consultancy with the company, right, they'll be disqualified. So that is all about the disqualification that we had to discuss. Whew. If we would have to look at this entire section, right, it is a little cumbersome. It is a lot to understand. I know you will have to repeat the lecture again to understand what disqualifications have been attracted. You have to remember each of them. I'll give you a quick review of the entire thing so that it is fresh in your mind. So number one, for disqualification, I cannot be a body corporate, right? Neither can I be an officer or employee, nor if I'm an officer or employee, my partners cannot be taking part. If I'm a person, me, my relative and a partner, if I'm holding any security or if I'm indebted for over 5 lakh or if I give a guarantee for someone else's indebtedness for over 1 lakh, I'm disqualified, right? If I am into any business relationship with any of the cash companies, including the associate's subsidiary, right, then I'm disqualified. But professional business relationship will not include the professional service that I provide and the relationship that I have in the ordinary course of business, right? Then after that, if my relative is the director or the key managerial person, I'm again disqualified, right? Next, if I exceed the limit of 20 companies, I'm disqualified. And for 20 companies, we take into consideration all the public, private, company having share capital, no share capital, company limited by guarantee, government company, and the not-for-profit companies as well, right? Next, if I have been convicted for a fraud and 10 years have not been over for that, and at last, if I'm me or my subsidiary, associate, or any of the entity is not providing any consultancy to the company, is engaged in any consultancy with the company, right? That is all about section 141. But we have a little more aspect in this section to cover that we'll be covering up in the next lecture, because this lecture has already been quite long, right? And second thing is, I will not leave this section on the note that I have left today, right? So in the coming lectures, what we'll do is we'll take up some of the case studies to understand some specific situations as well, right? That will make it very easy for you to relate what we have discussed today. So I'll give you a break till then. Go through this lecture again or go through those bullet points again, right? And then try to keep it in your memory, so that in the next lecture when we are discussing the case studies on the same, right, your brain will prompt you what is the right thing to do. Instead of just hearing me and listening to what I say and following, you will also be applying your brain, right? So before going to the next lecture, please keep in mind that you'll have to give a break after this lecture to reanalyze the thing and then test yourself in the next lecture, right? So until then, this is Abhinay Gupta signing off. Thank you and bye-bye. I'll be back with the case studies on this chapter, on this section, and then we will test your knowledge. Okay? Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.